Is there a strategy that'll help you grow your company faster? CEO Sales Strategies is an investigative business podcast for entrepreneurial people who never stop asking questions. Highly acclaimed sales revenue growth expert Doug C. Brown interviews CEOs, business owners, and professionals who serve them to uncover and share actionable tips and methods behind their bulletproof sales strategies. Topics covered on the show include their failures, struggles, secrets, and processes that help them succeed in selling millions to billions of dollars of their products and services, all with the sole aim of helping you grow your business. If you are eager to know the most effective sales secrets from the A players of the game, then the CEO Sales Strategies podcast is certainly the place to be.
Hey everyone, this is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. And today we have an amazing guest. I've known this gentleman now for over 2 decades. He's like a family member to me. His name is Andy, Mr. Andy Miller. Andy owns a company called BigSwiftKick.com, where he's advising some of the top companies in the world on how to grow their sales. And Andy also was a former business owner that built his company up and sold it for monies that most of us would love to. He was able to retire if he wanted to at that time, but he's a top producer himself. So top producers very rarely will retire. And Andy and I first met working with Mr. Chet Holmes at the Chet Holmes industry or agency, if you will. Andy was the forerunner. He built the consulting division for Chet Holmes. I actually worked, I'll say Andy was my mentor going through this. I learned so much about business, about strategy, about life, about sales. Super nice guy. And he's coming out with a book in the future. And I won't announce it yet because we're going to do another podcast on that. But pay attention because Andy is an expert, not only just in growing sales with companies, but he's an expert on our topic today. And he and I work closely together, and a lot of my expertise comes from his knowledge originally. And he's an expert on hiring top performers, sales performers, those A players, those things that companies say, oh, I want those. I want way more of those. Those people that consistently hit quota and then go above and beyond. Those people that can outsell other salespeople, usually, at a multiple, 3-to-1, et cetera, et cetera. So pay attention. Andy is a smart guy. He's very pragmatic. He's very data-driven. He's all about the science. And you're going to probably hear some of the science come out today in the form of statistics and studies and things of that nature. He is I would say he's the uncle to my children. This is how much I trust this man. So let's get on with the interview. And we're going to welcome Mr. Andy Miller from BigSwiftKick.com. Andy Miller, welcome to the CEO Sales Strategy Podcast. I'm very glad you're here.
Thanks, Doug Brown. Glad to be here.
So for those of you who don't know, Andy and I have known each other for a long time. I would consider ourselves brothers.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
Andy's known as Uncle Andy to my children. And Andy was one of my mentors and has been throughout my life growing up. Andy, I'm just going to say you're beyond a sales expert and an expert on anything pretty much to do with sales. So, so thanks for being here. Andy, I want to jump right in because you and I mean, we can just talk forever because we do, and it's awesome. But one of the sales growth strategies that companies can use is hiring and training high performers and growing those sales teams of high performers. And no matter what size business you are, it doesn't really matter. You can fill it up with what we used to call superstars, because Andy and I used to work together at the Chet Holmes organization as well. And these superstars can have a huge impact on your marketplace. And it starts, folks, with rethinking your ability to hire these superstars, because a lot of people want to hire them. Andy, why do you think, why do you think high performance teams or hiring high performance teams is considered a successful growth strategy, if you will?
Well, I mean, look at how much a high producer produces in revenue compared to a lower producer, right? And the mistake that companies make is in their interviewing process. Well, they make a number of mistakes, which we can get into later, but they hire the wrong people. And when you hire the wrong people, they don't perform very well. And you've seen the statistics year after year after year. It's always around 50%, but 50% of salespeople don't hit their quota. Now, why is that? Now, you don't necessarily need a superstar to hit quota. You just need the 50% of the salespeople that hit their quota. So, how do you weed out the 50% that can't? And how do you identify the 50% that can? Because a lot of people will say the superstar strategy is a flawed strategy.
And I'm not sure I agree or disagree with that, depending on the situation. But here's the thing: if you got 100% of your sales force hitting quota, you're probably doing pretty well at that point. Is that fair?
Yes. Well, I would say you're doing well. I would also challenge you and say, is your quota too low?
That is a really good question.
Yeah. So everybody's hitting quota. Is your quota too low? I mean, now, do I want it so high that nobody's accomplishing it? No, but should the majority of your people be hitting quota? Yes. But should 100% be hitting quota? That seems to me that we've lowered the bar too much.
Yeah, that's like getting 100% close rate consistently.
Yes, exactly. You're going to win some, you're going to lose some. Or, everybody, if you're a teacher, everybody in class gets an A.
Yeah.
No, not everybody gets an A. We lowered the bar too much.
So we're going to talk a lot about hiring the right type of people, because Andy's an expert on this. I learned a lot from Andy through the years. And I've hired, I don't know how many, maybe thousands of salespeople at this point over time. And so, Andy's been involved in doing the same type of thing. So Andy, for everyone out there that's wondering, okay, I would love to be able to raise my quota. I'd love to have a sales team that was just performing at this optimal level, consistently. How would they go about, we got to identify who they are, find out who, find them, hire them, onboard them, keep them. But I think it all begins with the definition of what really an A player would be. Would you agree with this? That you must define first who that A player is or what they look like?
Yes. And what we're really talking about is who's an A player for you, because an A player at one company isn't necessarily going to be an A player at your company. So you got to kind of decide, what does an A player look like? And I think that starts with getting really clear on what is required to really thrive at your company selling in your marketplace.
So, Andy, would it be like, all right, I need them to thrive, and so I need to set up systems and process for them to thrive, or these are the expectations that I need them to think about to thrive? What would be some more? So
it's the expectations and qualifications. So years ago, I was working on an account with a buddy of mine, and they wanted to hire some A players, and we said, okay, give us the job description and give us the ad that you run. The job description was a job description for a salesperson. Do you know that job description didn't mention the word sales in it once? Now, that's an extreme example to make the point, but it's kind of like, what is the job really? And then what does the ad need to say? Now, I've had a couple people over the last month, which has been fascinating. Somebody said, hey, if you want to hire A players, why don't you actually have a product that works that we can sell? Okay. If you have a product that's not released yet, or the product is broken, or you haven't figured out who your target audience is in terms of who you're selling to, or you haven't figured out your messaging, then you need to factor that in for the people that you're hiring who can thrive under those circumstances. Because some people love a good challenge, and other people, they don't want the challenge. They want give me a working product, give me the price list, tell me exactly who to call on, tell me exactly what to say, and then I'll grind it out all day long. So it's really getting clear on what do you have to work with, not being delusional about it, and then going out and hire people who love to work in those circumstances.
So it's about clarity in being organized and prepared for that particular, let's call them A players, right?
Yes.
So, so everyone listening here, please understand this, that A players they have certain characteristics about them, which we're going to talk about, but they need an environment in which to be an A player.
That's right.
So
you're looking for fit, Doug.
Right.
Who fits this environment? Who fits these circumstances?
So Andy, I'm going to sit on the other side of the table here and think, okay, I'm an owner of a company, I've got these salespeople, but I don't know, how do I identify what kind of environment to put together for my A player? I mean, do I need to upgrade things? Like, what do I look at?
Well, it's not the environment you put together. It's an honest self-assessment of the environment that you have. So I'll give you an example. So 3 years ago, I helped a client in the oil and gas industry hire a couple of really strong salespeople. I mean, they were in the top 10%. And we took a look, and they were getting ready to roll out a new product. The product wasn't ready yet. They hadn't tested the market that they were going to sell it to. They hadn't figured out how they were going to price it yet. And they hadn't figured out what quota was going to be or compensation was going to be. Now, that sounds like a pretty messy environment to walk into. How are you going to attract an A player to want to come sell in an environment that is so uncertain? And we thought, what do we need? Well, this is right now, this is where we're really at. This is where we're at. This is where we're hoping to be. Here's what we're willing to do until we get it figured out. And the icing on the cake was they offered equity share in the company, and they'd done this twice before in other companies that they had grown and sold. So it's, hey guys, you're going to take a risk. Let me share with you what the risk is. And that's the downside. Now let me share with you what the upside is. And now the question is that something that excites you and you want to be part of, or is that something where you're going, yeah, that's too much of a mess for me. I need something a little more certain than that. And we hired 4 people who were very excited about that opportunity, who produced really well. The first year was a mess. They even called me up and said, Andy, this is a real mess. And I said, did I misrepresent it? They said, not at all. I said, didn't I tell you you're going to call me and say this was a mess? They said, yeah, you did. I said, does that mean you want to quit? They go, not at all. I'm just going, this is a mess and I needed to talk to somebody. So I'm calling you going, you're right, this is a mess. But you know what? Once everything was figured out, they were out there opening doors and making sales, and they did really, really well. So, again, it's not about how do we need our culture to be, how do we need our environment to be. It's really about being honest about what you have and where you're at.
Interesting. So what I find fascinating about that, because I mean, Andy, you and I have talked dozens, if not 100 plus times about salespeople and hiring them. And the interesting thing to me is when you look at a top performer, and I talk with a lot of my clients or companies that are potentials, they're always telling me, well, these guys, all they want is the money. They're just looking for the money and that's it. So we're going to benchmark that and we're going to make it the highest compensation we can make it. And that's going to attract all these special people. I found it doesn't really, money is a component of it. And as you're demonstrating with these folks, part of the challenge of working there actually seemed to be appealing to them, is that Would you agree? Would you disagree?
Absolutely. I agree 100%. I'll give you two other data points that'll reinforce that. So Daniel Pink wrote a book called Drive. And in there, he talks about money as an incentive and some of the studies that have been done. And there was a point where once you've accomplished a certain level or degree of proficiency, more money becomes a disincentive. So which I found fascinating. Also, I use a number of sales assessments, and it was the last market downturn that we had caused a shift in salespeople where before they were more money motivated as a population. Now as a population, money's not the number one motivator. It's satisfaction. So what's part of satisfaction? It's providing good customer service or helping a client or customer accomplish something they want to accomplish. It's self-satisfaction of doing a good job, right? So it's the intrinsic things that you find rewarding as a salesperson. It's not the money. Now, don't get me wrong. They're not going to work for free. And they do want to be paid a premium, if they're good, or they want the opportunity to make a premium, meaning, low base, high commission. But there's a point where they're bringing in enough that the money is no longer the reward. It's the recognition. It's the satisfaction. It's the challenge. It's doing something that nobody else has been able to figure out how to do.
That is a very, 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 I'm going to keep saying very, folks, because that distinction there is the key, right? Because, Andy and I have worked and hired many, many A players over the years. And the reality is that once you get to a certain point of income, it's like, okay, what's the next mountain I want to climb, right? Yep. And this is how an A player thinks. They're consistently thinking there. So there's got to be opportunities for some type of growth within your plan. And it's not just necessarily monetary growth, because, you start making $1 million a year as a salesperson. That's nice, but then it's like, okay, if your needs are only at $150,000 a year, money's not going to be the major driver anymore. They still I've not met most top players, Andy, who don't want to be in the top 1 or 2 consistently. Yeah. And
actually, can I share a story with you?
Yeah, please.
You're going to love this one. So years ago, I was working with a software company, and their number one rep, and this is a large software company. They were worldwide. They probably had, about 400 salespeople. This guy was always number one every year. What made it so fascinating was he was a DuPont trust fund baby. So he never needed to work. He was worth millions and millions of dollars, had a nice house in a great location in DC, Georgetown, for those who know DC, nice car, all that stuff. And I asked him, I said, every year you're the number one rep. And by the way, he wasn't number one by a hair. He was number one by light years. And I asked him, every year you're number one by far. There's not even a close second. And yet I know you're a trust fund baby. So it's not like you're doing this for the money. Why are you doing this? And he said, because all my life, everybody said that because I was a trust fund baby, everything had been given to me, that I never earned anything, that I wanted people to know I am quite capable on my own without my trust fund. And that's why every year I have to be number one, because I want to show people that I'm capable. Everything was not given to me. Fascinating, isn't it?
It's totally fascinating, because, and I know that people who are hearing this are going, wait a minute, come on. But folks, I got to tell you, it's true. Andy is describing the classic A player. We have motivation of different facets, right? Yes. And I've known you, Andy, to be one of those guys that it's like, I'll show you, I'm going to show you.
Well, you just nailed it, Doug. The A players are always out to prove something. Yeah. I use, this is probably an outdated story, but think of Michael Jordan. He did not make his junior varsity team in high school, at least the first time around. And that just made him so angry that he said, I'm just going to outwork everybody. And even when he made it into the pros, he still outworked everybody. It wasn't because he was naturally talented. It's the old, cream rises to the top. He was not the cream. He was the hard worker. He had to fight his way to the top. So he was out to prove something. The DuPont Trust Fund baby, he was out to prove something. Me, if something can't be done, you tell me it can't be done, and then get out of the way, and I'm going to show you it can be done. So, and Doug, I know you're of that mindset too. So, it's not necessarily about the money. It's about the challenge and proving themselves.
So what's so fascinating about this, Andy, is it's spot on, number one. But a lot of people don't think like this when they're going to hire somebody. Like I was reading last night, getting prepared for this. I'm looking on all these expert blogs of people who are supposed to be experts in hiring, and I found this article, and it said, there's a massive difference between hiring and hiring superstars. To hire a superstars, you want to find and hire motivated people. A. B. Choose people who work well with others. C. Hire employees who follow the rules. And right then and there, I just had to stop reading because I know that that's not what top players are about. Top players will work well with other people, but not necessarily, because they're constantly pushing the boundaries. And I don't know, Andy, I can speak for myself. I very rarely followed the rules when I worked for other companies. Yes. So those people who are considering these top 8 players, should they be a little bit prepared for maybe a maverick type mentality that's going to come in and disrupt part of their organization, or what should they think about?
Well, they might be, but they don't necessarily have to be a maverick. I mean, there's I'm going to deviate for a little bit, but a lot of times I'll hear people say, well, we like to interview and hire athletes. They were a high school athlete, college athlete, whatever. And I'll go, okay, why athletes? And they go, well, they know how to be on a team. They know how to do well. Again, it depends on which sport they played. But the question I'll ask them is, do you ask them the question, were they naturally talented or did they have to work for it? Because if they were naturally talented and they were an athlete, they did not have to work for it. I want the athlete that was the Michael Jordan that didn't make it and got so mad that they decided to step up and fight their way to the top. That's what I want. I want some fight in the dog. And then they'll figure out how to make it happen. That might mean going maverick sometimes. It might mean playing by the rules of the system sometimes. It really depends on your company and where your company is in its growth stage. Are you an early stage company? Are you a late, more mature? You got your systems and processes. Again, you got to figure out what is our environment, and who's going to be attracted to working in that kind of environment. So, but yeah, I'd love to give you an answer of, it's these 3 things. It's not. It's what is my environment? What do we have to work with? What's the ugly part of our environment or the way we're working? Tell people that. Here's the ugly downside of where we're at right now. Because that's what you want. You want people who are excited about the ugly downside challenge.
There's so much to unpack there between the fight and the dog and the things. What a lot of people mistake, and we're going to get into some mistakes that people make in hiring. They don't look at this thing as a holistic process. They look at it as, I'm going to post a job, right? And I've found that people who are A players, they're looking for something that's more holistic. They don't want to turn over. They want to get into a company and they want to grow with that company.
Yep.
So, all right. So Andy, we've talked about identifying them, which is great. So the first step, getting clear on the persona, I would say, and the environment in which they come in and being very transparent about the whole process of what they're about to embark upon.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a business owner, CEO, I VP of or president of sales. I'm buying into this concept. All right. How do I find these people then? Right. Because where do they hang out? What, do I write an ad? What do I do next?
Okay. So the most obvious way to find these folks is ask your employees who know somebody like this, but you got to get clear on what they look like, right? So you've got to sit down and go, what does the person look like who would thrive in this environment? So you come up with that description. And then you say to your employees, anybody know anybody who looks like, acts like, sounds like, fits this description. And we'll give you a bonus, a referral fee, basically. Sometimes it's 500, sometimes it's 1,000, but I would say, offer a referral fee, but usually you don't pay the referral fee out until it's 3 to 6 months after that person's been on board. So that is your strongest way to do it. The next way to do it is, and the most popular is through Indeed. Now, LinkedIn's a possibility also, but people seem to be finding it's significantly more salespeople on Indeed than LinkedIn. And then the last one is, always keep your eyes and ears open. Always be recruiting, right? Mm. So now, if you're going to do on Indeed, you gotta write your ad. And I would say, this drives me nuts. Somebody goes to write an ad. What do? They get on Google. They type sales wanted sales person ad. They find something and then they tweak it and then they post it on whatever job site they're posting it on. That's not customized. That's not an accurate representation. It's lazy. If you want to get what you really want, you got to think of this as this is a dating wanted ad. This is what you would put on eHarmony, right? So you got to really craft that thing. And if you want to, you could do a contest of get a couple people in the company going, hey, I want to write an ad. If you're going to write an ad that would really attract somebody to come here, what would that ad look like? And you know what? Do a little competition because you're going to get some insights onto what people really think is needed.
I love that idea in the contest because it brings the power of the minds together and you just get different ideas and different thoughts from different people because your employees, folks, they tend to see things you don't, right? So they're in it just in a different place. So, okay. So Andy, what kind of ad do we write? Just, like you said, don't go to Google and just cut and paste the ad, but do I need to write the ad to challenge these people? Do I need to write the ad to what? Truth and transparency?
Yes, but all the above. So one thing you need to do before you write your ad, go to Glassdoor and look at your company ratings. Because I've talked to a number of people and they go, number of recruiters and employers, they go, we ignore Glassdoor because that's where the disgruntled people go. You're right. That's where they go to voice themselves and to be heard. But you have a problem. 55% of all candidates go to Glassdoor before responding to your ad. So that means if you have negative reviews and you haven't dealt with that, half the people who could come to you aren't even going to come. They're not even coming to the dance because they go, I read their Glassdoor reviews. The company sucks. I'm not even responding. So go to the Glassdoor ratings, come up with a strategy of dealing with what's on there. Also, so you got to respond to it. Also, you've got to factor that into the ad you're going to write. Because if there's a bunch of ugly things going on, maybe one of the executives, is being inappropriate or they're a real taskmaster or they're difficult to work with or who knows what. Maybe one of your products is broken. Maybe it's becoming outdated. Maybe the industry is changing. But whatever those things are, you've got to factor that into your ad. Now, Doug, you asked what kind of ad to write.
Yes.
So the ad that I love to write, and this ad is it's a legendary ad that's a myth. So and it's called the Shackleton ad. Are you familiar with that one?
I am.
Okay. So I love the Shackleton ad. So if people listening to this Google the Shackleton ad, it's going to pop up, and it's about 5 sentences long, and I can't paraphrase it, but here's the background behind it. Ernest Shackleton was an explorer. It was a race to the Arctic Circle, and he was looking for men who wanted to go on this hazardous journey. So the ad basically said men wanted for hazardous journey, long cold nights, long days, cold nights, chance of success doubtful. Translation, you're probably going to die. Fame and fortune upon success. So it was a very simple ad. I probably botched it up a little bit there, but it was literally 5 sentences. And here's the power of that ad. First of all, it tells you about what's the challenge. Now, some people would have said, why would I want to do that? Others would have said, man, a trip to the Arctic, that would be cool. Oh, it's going to be challenging. I love a good challenge. I love the labor involved. I love trying to figure out the strategy and the approach and the plan. I mean, they got all excited about what it is. It's an adventure. So they're getting excited about the adventure, knowing that there's challenge and danger. And then there's the second part of that ad is the payoff. What's the payoff? Fame and fortune, upon successful completion. So you're going to make a lot of money if we're successful, and you're going to be famous if we're successful. And now there's been some debate about whether that ad was really run or not. But I can tell you this, if you look at the research, it's very clear that when you tell people about the negative downside, hard parts of the job, that you've managed their expectations, and you're attracting people who like that, and your turnover is reduced because you warn them that this is what they're stepping into. And when it happens, they go, oh yeah, not a big deal. You warned me about it. If you don't warn them about it, and then it comes up, they go, wow, nobody told me about this. This is pretty ugly. What else are they hiding? Maybe I made the wrong decision. Maybe I should call that other company that made me an offer and tell them I changed my mind. Is their position still open? That's what happens when you don't talk about the negative side and set the expectations.
And so many people in ads do not do this. I mean, when you were describing it, Andy, I remember when I was going into the military, the military ads are written very much like this, right? It's like they show you running through a field, bombs going off, all kinds of things, whatever's happening, right? And we're like, wow, I won't get hurt, but I'll get in there and get done. I'll do it. So, you enlist, right? And I remember when I enlisted, they're like, hey, we're looking for people who want to be Army Rangers, right? We're going to jump out of planes. You're going to, do all these things. You might, do XYZ, very dangerous missions, but, blah, blah, blah. And all of us were like, oh, wow. We raise our hands, because we want to go there, right? Because we wanted the fame of being an Army Ranger. We wanted that those wings on our chest, if you will, from jumping out of the plane. So the ads work, folks. Follow that process and, get input from people, because you don't have to do all this by yourself when you're trying to do this. So Andy, we found them, we've identified them, we found them. Now we're going to go on and we're going to kind of want to hire them, right? So, I mean, do you do a traditional interview? Do you use assessments? How do you hire these people?
Well, yeah, so you do a little bit of all the above, but I'm going to recommend kind of a contrarian order sequence to the process. So first thing I do is I assess them. I use an evaluation or an assessment, and I test them before I even talk to them. And the reason I do that is when you look at all the different selection methods, Schmidt and Hunter were the leading organizational psychologists who have been researching for years what is the most accurate way of selecting all the different methodologies, right? Resumes, interviews, behavioral tests, personality tests, intellectual tests, or IQ tests, job-specific tests. They've looked at all those things. I mentioned references. So there's a whole number of ways, and others that I didn't even list. So they took a look at what's the most effective to what's the least effective. And if you look at how people interview, most people, I'm going to call it a traditional interview, that's only 38% predictive of whether the candidate can do the job or not. And part of that is because we're bad at interviewing. Part of that is because there's lots of bias that creeps into that. Doug, did you know that most people make their decision whether they want this person to move forward in the interviewing process or not in the first 5 minutes?
In the first 5 minutes.
In the first 5 minutes, they make up their mind if they want this person to pass or not pass. And they don't even realize that. That's how much bias there is. They also found that if it was done face-to-face initially, and the woman was pregnant, they would not get approved to go forward. If they were doing it on a phone call or doing it behind a screen door, so was it the New York Symphony did this? They had people interview behind a screen, so the interviewers could not see the person. They could hear their voice. They could hear them play their instrument. And what they found is 40% more of the candidates made it to the next step because they were qualified and the bias was eliminated because of the screen. They didn't have the visual cues. I couldn't look and say, he's tall or she's pretty or they're just like me or they're not like me. All that bias is cut out of it. So the first thing I do is I test them.
And what do you use to test them, Andy? I mean, assessments of some sort, right?
Yeah. So I've got a number of assessments, and here's the challenge to that question. Everybody wants to know what's the test to use, and it comes down. It doesn't work that way. It comes down to what are you trying to measure? What are you trying to determine? So, are you trying to figure out cultural fit? Are you trying to figure out, can they hit quota? Are you trying to figure out, can they make it in a highly competitive market where we're the underdog? So you got to figure out what is it I'm trying to measure and then pick the right tool or combination of tools. So I have a combination of tools that I use, but according to Schmidt and Hunter, using the right tools in the right combination makes it is 75% predictive of their ability to do the job.
So that's huge, right? Because
it's double the interview, right? The interview is 38%. The right combination is 75%. That's double right there before you even meet them.
So, and being specific, so this goes back to the persona you want to attract folks. And then what we're doing is we're matching, like Andy said, eHarmony, we're matching you up, right? We're matching you up, and you want to use specific assessments for specific end goals that you're seeking. So if you're looking, for example, for a personality, you're going to want to use more of a personality type assessment. If you're looking for, somebody who has a will to sell, you need a sales assessment that's going to measure that. And so whatever specifically you're looking for, that's where you're going to use the type of assessments. That's what you're saying, Andy, correct?
Right. And if you look at a multi-measurement tool, meaning it measures multiple things, not behavior, not personality, not skill set, but the combination of those and many other things, how hungry they are, what are their belief systems, what are their skill set. An assessment like that is 91% predictive. If you use a behavior assessment, that's only 20% predictive. When I say behavior, that would be something like DISC. Mm-hmm. If you say personality assessment, something like Myers-Briggs, that would only be 31% predictive. And a matter of fact, Disc and Myers-Briggs both say on their websites, do not use this for hiring. It does not predict a person's ability to do the job. So, Doug, there's hundreds and hundreds of assessments on the market. And what really ticks me off is a lot of them are misrepresented. I don't think they're misrepresented intentionally. I think the distributors or the people selling the assessments don't really understand what they're selling and what they do. It'd be like me selling a pair of pliers and telling you that it's great for driving nails because I don't really understand what pliers were designed to do.
Right. But you can hit the nail with them. That's
exactly. It doesn't mean the pliers are bad. They're just used in the wrong way. And by the way, if you use the wrong assessment in hiring and you weed people out who don't get hired and they decide to sue you for discrimination or whatever it is, if you use the wrong assessment, that's your fault. That's not the assessment company's fault. That's been proven in court already. So if you're using personality or behavioral assessments, or you're not sure if you're using the right assessment, you should call me so we can talk about that because you're at risk.
Well, speaking of calling you, Andy, I mean, can I give out your website?
Yes, please.
It's www.bigswiftkick.com. That's www.bigswiftkick.com. And Andy, I know you have a free sales assessment test that you're going to offer everybody. That's on the website, correct?
Yes, you can go there and you'll find it under the resource tab. So go to bigswiftkick.com. Big Swift Kick, just like your daddy used to give you. Go to the resource tab, and first drop down you'll find on there is take a free sales assessment. Now, I'm going to want to have a conversation with you first to make sure, is that the right assessment or should it be something else? But it's there if you want to take one.
And folks, we're going to post the link, obviously, so you can just click on the link, but definitely go to bigswift.com and check it out. There's a lot of great information on there. And take a look at Andy's client list too. He was an inspiration for me. I wanted to get a client list similar to his when I was first looking at your client list, Andy. I was like, so, all right, Andy. So we're wrapping up here, but all right, we talked about how to identify, find, hire them. Now we got to kind of onboard and keep them, right?
Yep. And that to me is fascinating because most companies don't put much worth into onboarding or appropriate onboarding. They'll do a little bit and then they'll call it onboarding. Mm-hmm. You can go out and find somebody who's a right fit, who's really excited and motivated about your world. But if you don't onboard them properly, they're going to go, have I made the wrong decision? And they're going to get frustrated and go. Also, part of that onboarding is not just a 1, 2, 3 day onboarding event. It's also, is their manager working with them, coaching them, mentoring them, developing them on a weekly basis? I mean, if you're hiring people who are millennials or younger, one of the key things is they want to be developed. So if that's not part of your plan, you're going to lose them pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Now, it's funny. I was talking to a guy the other day who said, yeah, I used some sales assessments and they didn't work very well. And I said, can I ask you a couple questions? And he said, yeah. I said, did you reach out to the assessment company who sold them to you? He goes, no, I didn't. I said, did you have a structured interview? And he said, what's a structured interview? I said, structured interview is predefined questions, predefined answers, great answers, average answers, poor answers, with a point value for each of those answers. 5 for best, 1 or 0 for terrible answer, and maybe 3 for average, with a scorecard. He goes, no, we didn't do that. And I said, how'd you onboard those folks? He goes, oh, yeah, we did a 1-day kind of introduction to the company and how we do things. I said, yep, wasn't long enough. I said, did the manager coach them for an hour a week for the first 90 days? There's kind of a 90-day ramp up. He goes, no, we didn't do that. And I said, and you're telling me the assessments didn't work?
So please listen to what Andy's saying. So, structured interview would be similar to how you would score a lead. right? So if you have a lead coming in, you're going to assign a value to it, each and every question that you're asking within that structured interview. And to Andy, to illustrate how important what you're saying is, I worked with a company and they were sliding. They slid from 50 to 48 million. And they called me in, and what I recognized was they had a ton of leads coming in, but they weren't able to hire correctly. So I put in, and this is the reason I'm telling you this, folks, is because if you take Andy's advice, which I have in the past and implemented it, then what ended up happening is I discovered immediately when I did the initial look at the company, they didn't have a clear onboarding strategy for their players. So what was happening is they were hiring a ton of people, and they were tridding out at 82% because people were just coming in and just going out. So what we did is exactly what Andy said. We put in a structured process. And then on the onboarding, you have to have not just a 3-day onboarding. You have to have a consistent onboarding process, and that includes training throughout the duration of when people are there. And then what we did is I got the management to actually become coaches versus managers in addition to managing. And miraculously, Andy, they grew from 48 million to 110 million in 2 years and retained their talent.
Yep.
So this works, guys and gals. So please make sure you follow it. All right. So we onboarded them and we want to keep them on. And Andy, I guess the last question I'd love to ask about this is, do other A players know other A players that if they're at a company and they're loving where they're at and they recognize, man, there's openings here, do they get a hold of their friends and buddies and tell them about these openings?
They do if they think it's a real opportunity.
Huh. What does that do to your recruiting cost?
Goes way down, and your speed to hire is much faster.
Ooh.
Think about that.
So I could put these people on faster. They're going to be birds of a feather, basically. They're going to be similar to the people that they hang out with because, A players are not probably going to want to recommend people that would damage their reputation. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's right.
And I know I'm being a little facetious here, but so you got your recruiting costs down, folks, which can range, 20, 25% if you're using a recruiter, right? I mean, and so you're increasing your profitability immediately by doing this. So, Andy, this has been awesome. I'm so grateful you're here, and I know everybody listening is very grateful. Anything else that maybe I shouldn't have asked, or that I didn't ask you around this that maybe I should have?
Not that I can think of. Listen, we could talk about this for hours, right?
Oh, sure.
But to me, it's, you got to define the job right? Then you got to write that ad that tells the truth. Then you got to screen them up front so you eliminate your bias and you're only talking to the people that fit your criteria. Then you've got to do a structured interview with a scorecard, and you've got to onboard them properly, and then you've got to coach them. And if you're not doing all of that, you're going to have massive system breakdown, massive failure.
Absolutely. And they love recognition, folks, as well. So once you get them there and you got them and you're keeping them, make sure you reward them with praise. Hate to say it, I'm one of these guys, but I have an ego too. And I like to hear that I'm doing a nice job. So Andy, I always love to conclude on this particular question. And I didn't give it to you up front because I wanted to get your brotherly love out of this question, if you will. So, Andy, if you could come back, I mean, whether it's living or past, if you could become a superhero for a day and you could affect change in any way possible, who would that superhero be and what kind of changes would you put in?
Oh, God, I have no idea on that one, Doug. Does it have to be a known superhero? Or
No, it could be anybody. It could be living or fictitious.
I don't know what I would call the superhero. And yeah, I'd love to say, I'd end famine and poverty and war and all that stuff. But what I think I would do is be a superhero that would give everybody the gift of wanting to understand each other.
Wow, that's powerful.
Because if you can understand each other, listen, we don't need to be the same. We all have different desires and goals and dreams, but you know what? Is there any reason why we can't coexist? And yeah, I would give everybody the desire and the goal and the ability to understand each other, because that's your starting point, right? If you can't even talk, nothing gets done.
Without question. So we'll call that Captain Insight or Captain Understanding, or we'll come up with a better.
I like Captain Insight.
That's awesome. Andy Miller. Andy, my good friend, I really appreciate you being here. I know everybody else is too. Thank you. This was awesome. And folks, don't forget to go to www.bigswiftkick.com. Check it out. Get a hold of Andy if you're looking to hire people. If you're looking, to grow your company in general, anything on and around the sales side, Andy's your guy. I've known him for, a long time. Yeah. And he's as honest as can be and as truthful as can be. And Andy, again, thank you for being here. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Doug. Thanks for having me.
All right, Andy, you take care.
Bye.
Bye now. Okay, that was awesome. Let's talk about the unpacking this here, on the A player list. Look, here's the bottom line. Andy gave you a pretty straightforward step-by-step process, right? On identifying, finding, hiring, and onboarding and keeping them. You must have a structured interview, folks. And structured means same questions for everyone. One of the challenges I see a lot of times with clients that I work with, when they're trying to hire, they just got this variation going on, and there's no consistency on how to score these people or what the value is based on the questions. You don't hire a sales A player from a resume. They're going to have impressive resumes, but let's face it, folks, most people in resumes, when they're using resumes, they're going to embellish upon those resumes. So the way you can use that resume is you can actually use it to find out if it's true or not. You can ask questions on and around it to expose those things. Now, A players will also embellish a bit, but they'll be a heck of a lot more truthful than people who have really not accomplished these things, but write them down on paper and put them in front. I can't tell you, one of the biggest mistakes I see people hiring salespeople is they try to hire on a resume, and the reality is the resume is not reality. Andy and I were talking about assessments right after this call. And we were talking about, when they do personality assessments, because a lot of times companies try to use personality assessments, and the personality assessments are assessing the personality. So, people come back and go, wow, these are spot on. This is exactly how this person is. Of course it is. It's reading their personality, but that doesn't tell you, can they sell or not? That doesn't tell you, do they have the desire to fight, to win, right? Most of the time, it's usually around their personality. So it's kind of like Andy and I were talking. It's kind of like cold reading, when people do cold reading, and I'll call it the mystic, or the person who does the cold reading, can tell people about things about their family, because they're able to cue in on the things that assessments would basically cue in on. And people are like, my gosh, these are so accurate. And my dog, Skippy, I was able to talk to him, things like that. Doesn't mean these people are frauds or fakes or anything like that. I'm just saying there's a process to all of this. And there's a process to hiring sales top performers. I was hiring top performers on a very consistent basis throughout most of my career. So I've hired, I'm going to say hundreds, if not well over 1,000 of them. I stopped counting. But the reality is, and Andy was part of shaping that whole process. So go to his website, that's mine. Go to his website, www.bigswiftkick.com, and go to the assessments. And I'm going to put the link in for the assessments. Andy's offering a free assessment, a free sales assessment to see how you're doing with your company. And if you want to hire more sales superstars. So this has been a pleasure. It's been an honor having him on here. Andy is a very busy guy. And, again, we're like family. So he came on to help us out. And here at the CEO Sales Strategies podcast, what we're doing is we're bringing in people who have actually accomplished things in business, or those people who are serving them. So if you know anybody that's you'd recommend to come here, please send me an email at doug@businesssuccessfactors.com or call me directly at area code 603-595-0303. And of course, if you love this podcast and you love the content, please give it an honest rating. But, if it's a 5-star, please give a 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that, whether you're listening to it on whatever medium. And if you find that this particular episode or any episodes could help someone else, they're trying to hire top performers, please, 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 please share it with your folks. This information is not readily available that you're hearing on this particular podcast or any of them that we're going to be doing, but it's truthful information and it will help that person get to the next level. And it might just save them from spending out monies that they're not supposed to, increasing their profitability. And who knows, they get the process down on how to hire these A players. They might just double their sales and they'll be very grateful to you. All right, folks. Again, this is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategy Podcast. I'm grateful you're here. I'm grateful you're listening.